The text message came through at 2:47 a.m., 3 months after the divorce was finalized. You owe me $50,000 for the baby. My lawyer says you verbally agreed. Pay up, or I'm taking you to court. I stared at my phone screen in the darkness of my rental apartment, wondering if Natalie had finally lost her mind completely. We didn't have a baby. We'd never even discussed having one. My name is Jack Pearson, and I'm about to tell you how my ex-wife and my own mother tried to destroy my life, and how I burned their world to the ground in return. Divorce is like a tornado, except a tornado doesn't demand alimony and half your retirement account. It also doesn't sleep with your gym instructor and then blame you for being emotionally unavailable. But I'm getting ahead of myself. I'm 37 years old, an IT specialist for a mid-sized insurance company in Cedar Falls, Iowa. Not glamorous, but it pays the bills and keeps me in craft beer and decent internet. I married Natalie when I was 29. She was 26, beautiful, charming, and had this way of making everyone in a room feel like they were the most important person alive. That should have been my first warning sign. People who are good at making everyone feel special are usually good at making everyone feel like garbage too. The marriage lasted 7 years. 7 years of gradually realizing that the woman I'd fallen for was actually a carefully constructed Instagram filter, and the real Natalie underneath was manipulative, narcissistic, and utterly incapable of admitting fault. The final straw came when I found out about Brett Callahan, the owner of Peak Performance Gym downtown. All muscle, no brain, and apparently exactly what Natalie wanted. I didn't fight the divorce. I just wanted out. I gave her more than I should have, signed the papers, and moved into a rental house on the east side of town. It was small, needed work, but it was mine. No more walking on eggshells, no more wondering which version of Natalie I'd come home to. That was 3 months ago. I thought I was free. Then came that text message. I showed it to my best friend Carter the next morning over coffee at Rosie's Diner. Carter's a paramedic, seen everything, fazed by nothing, with a dark sense of humor that matches mine perfectly. "A baby?" Carter said, reading the message on my phone. "You two have a baby?" "We don't have a goldfish, let alone a baby," I said. "This is insane." Could she be claiming you got her pregnant before the divorce? We weren't sleeping together for the last year and a half of our marriage. She was too busy with Brett. Carter handed back my phone. "So, what's her angle?" "No idea, but knowing Natalie, it's going to be elaborate and completely shameless." I didn't have to wait long to find out. 2 days later, I got a formal letter from Natalie's lawyer, a guy named Philip Strand who specialized in family law and asset recovery, which is lawyer speak, for helping terrible people squeeze money out of their exes. The letter laid out Natalie's claim in excruciating detail. She'd given birth to a son 6 months ago, 8 months after our divorce was finalized. She claimed that during our marriage, I'd verbally agreed to support any children she had, even if they came after our separation. She had witnesses who would testify to this agreement. She had photos of the baby who supposedly looked remarkably similar to me. She wanted $50,000 in back support and $2,000 monthly going forward. It was complete fiction, every word of it. I called my own lawyer, a sharp woman named Linda Gold, who'd handled my divorce. Linda had a reputation for being unflappable and had a dry wit that could cut through courtroom drama like a hot knife through butter. "This is absurd," Linda said after reading the letter. "You can't be held responsible for a child that isn't yours, and there's no such thing as a binding verbal agreement for future hypothetical children." "So we fight it?" "Absolutely. But Jack, I have to ask, is there any possibility this child is yours?" "Zero. We weren't intimate for over a year before the divorce. The timeline doesn't work." "Then we'll demand a paternity test. This should be straightforward." That's what we both thought. We were wrong. The preliminary hearing was scheduled for 2 weeks later at the Cedar Falls courthouse. I showed up in my best suit, which admittedly wasn't saying much since I usually wore jeans and company polo shirts to work, and met Linda outside the courtroom. "Remember," she said, "stay calm. Don't react to anything Natalie says, and let me do the talking." I nodded. I could do that. I'm generally pretty good at keeping my cool, which is why I survived 7 years of marriage to a woman who treated emotional manipulation like an Olympic sport. We walked into the courtroom, and that's when I got my first surprise. Natalie was there with her lawyer, looking perfect as always. Designer dress, perfect makeup, hair styled like she was about to do a photo shoot. Brett was sitting behind her, wearing a suit that looked like it was strangling him. He was a gym rat, not a courtroom guy, and it showed. But the real shock was who was sitting next to Natalie. My mother, Rita Pearson, 58 years old, Queen Bee of Cedar Falls Society, president of the Garden Club, organizer of the annual Founders Day Parade, and the woman who'd spent my entire childhood telling me I was never quite good enough. She was dressed in her Sunday best, looking dignified and concerned, every inch the worried grandmother. I felt my stomach drop. What is she doing here? Linda's jaw tightened. I don't know, but I don't like it. The judge, a middle-aged woman named Patricia Hoffman, called the hearing to order. Philip Strand stood up and launched into his opening statement, painting Natalie as a struggling single mother and me as a deadbeat dad, who'd made promises and then abandoned his responsibilities. Then he called my mother to testify. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Rita took the stand, placed her hand on the Bible, and swore to tell the truth. Then she proceeded to lie through her teeth. Jack and Natalie discussed having children many times, Rita said, her voice steady and sincere. Jack specifically told me that he wanted to support Natalie even if they separated, because he valued family above everything else. He said, and I quote, "Mom, no matter what happens between us, I'll make sure Natalie and any children are taken care of." I remember it clearly because I was so proud of him for being so mature about it. It was a complete fabrication. We'd never had that conversation. My mother and I barely spoke during my marriage because she'd never approved of Natalie, or so I thought. Apparently that had changed. Linda cross-examined her, but Rita was unshakable. She had dates, details, and that air of maternal authority that made her seem utterly credible. Then Natalie took the stand. She had photos of the baby, a chubby 6-month-old with dark hair and blue eyes. She showed them to the judge, pointing out supposed similarities to my baby pictures. She cried on cue, talking about how hard it was to raise a child alone, how she'd trusted me, how betrayed she felt. It was a masterful performance. I wanted to vomit. Judge Hoffman looked at the photos, looked at me, and then looked at Linda. "Ms. Gold, does your client dispute paternity?" "Absolutely, Your Honor. We request an immediate DNA test." "That seems reasonable," the judge said. "However, given the testimony we've heard today and the photographic evidence, I'm going to schedule a full hearing in 6 weeks. In the meantime, Mr. Pearson, I'm ordering you to pay temporary support of $1,000 per month pending the results of the paternity test." "Your Honor," Linda started, but the judge held up her hand. "This is temporary and subject to revision. We'll reconvene when we have scientific evidence. Court adjourned." I sat there, stunned. I was being ordered to pay support for a child that wasn't mine, based on lies from my ex-wife and my own mother. Outside the courthouse, I confronted Rita. What the hell was that? She looked at me with that expression I knew so well. Disappointed, superior, condescending. "Jack, you need to take responsibility for your actions." "What actions? That's not my child." "Natalie says it is. And you did make promises to her." "No, I didn't. You just committed perjury." Rita's eyes went cold. Watch your tone with me. I'm your mother, and I'm trying to help you do the right thing. You always were stubborn, even as a child. That's why you need guidance." She walked away, leaving me standing there with my mouth open. Carter met me at Murphy's bar that evening. I was already 2 beers in when he arrived. "That bad?" he asked, sliding into the booth across from me. "Worse. My mother testified against me. She lied under oath and made me look like a deadbeat." Carter let out a low whistle. "Your own mom? That's cold." "I don't understand it. She never even liked Natalie when we were married. She was always making snide comments about her, saying she wasn't good enough for me. Now suddenly they're best friends? People are weird, man, especially family." I took a long drink of my beer. "The judge ordered me to pay temporary support. $1,000 a month for a kid that isn't mine. Can't you just take the DNA test and prove it?" "We will, but it'll take weeks to get the results, and in the meantime, I'm out $1,000 a month. And the way that Judge was looking at me, I'm not sure she's going to be fair even when the results come back." Carter was quiet for a moment. "You know what this sounds like, a scam, a really elaborate scam. But why? Natalie got plenty in the divorce, and why would my mother be involved?" "That's what we need to find out." Over the next week, I started digging. I went through old emails, text messages, anything I could find from my marriage. I was looking for any mention of children, any conversation that could be twisted into the verbal agreement Natalie was claiming. I found nothing, not a single email or text about having kids. In fact, I found several conversations where Natalie explicitly said she didn't want children because they would ruin her figure and limit her freedom. But I did find something else. Hidden in a folder on my old laptop, one I'd kept but rarely used, were scanned documents from my parents' divorce. My father had died 5 years ago, but before that, he and my mother had gone through a bitter separation when I was in college. I'd never looked at the documents closely. It was too painful at the time, and after my father passed, I just archived everything and tried to forget about it. Now, reading through them, I saw a pattern that made my blood run cold. My mother had claimed my father had made verbal promises to support her in the lifestyle she was accustomed to. She'd produced witnesses, her friends from the garden club, who testified to these promises. She'd manipulated the narrative, played the victim, and walked away with far more than she was entitled to. It was the exact same playbook Natalie was using now. I called Carter immediately. "I need your help with something that's probably not entirely legal." "I'm listening." "Natalie has a baby. That baby isn't mine. But if we can prove who the father actually is, this whole case falls apart." "You thinking Brett?" "Has to be. The timeline matches, but I need proof." Carter was quiet for a moment. "You want to get a DNA sample from the kid." "Is that crazy?" "Probably, but I'm in. What's the plan?" Getting a DNA sample from a baby sounds easy in theory. In practice, it's surprisingly difficult. When you're not supposed to be anywhere near said baby. Carter and I spent 3 days surveilling Natalie's house, a nice 2-story in the suburbs that she'd bought with her divorce settlement and probably some of Brett's money. We watched her routine, noted when she left, when Brett visited, when she took the baby out. "This feels very stalkerish," Carter said from the passenger seat of my car. "We're not stalking, we're conducting surveillance." "That's what stalkers say." "Shut up." On the 4th day, we got our chance. Natalie loaded the baby into her car and drove to Target. We followed at a safe distance. She went inside, pushing the baby in a stroller, and we trailed behind, pretending to shop. When she stopped in the baby section to look at clothes, Carter created a distraction. He accidentally knocked over a display of baby bottles. While Natalie and a store employee were distracted by the crash and Carter's profuse apologies, I moved in close to the stroller. The baby was chewing on a pacifier. I had a plastic bag in my pocket. I reached down, smiled at the kid, who actually was kind of cute in a generic baby way, and gently pulled the pacifier from his mouth, replacing it with an identical one I'd bought earlier. The whole thing took maybe 10 seconds. Then I walked away, heart pounding, the pacifier sealed in the plastic bag in my jacket pocket. "Got it," I whispered to Carter as we met up in the automotive section. "You're certifiably insane," he said, "but I respect it." We sent the pacifier to a private DNA testing lab that afternoon, along with a cheek swab from me. The lab promised results in 5 days. It wasn't cheap, $500 for the rush service, but it was worth it. While we waited for the results, I started investigating my mother's connection to Natalie. How had they gone from mutual dislike to co-conspirators? I started with social media. My mother wasn't particularly tech-savvy, but she had a Facebook account she used mainly to post photos of her garden and share inspirational quotes. I scrolled back through her timeline, looking for any interaction with Natalie. I found it about 8 months ago, right around the time Natalie would have gotten pregnant. A post from my mother. "Lovely lunch with a dear friend. Sometimes the best family isn't the one you're born with, but the one you choose." The photo showed my mother and Natalie at the Garden Bistro, the nicest restaurant in Cedar Falls. They were smiling, glasses of wine raised in a toast. The comments were telling. Several of my mother's friends had commented, "So glad you two are getting along now. And family is everything." I checked Natalie's Instagram. She'd blocked me after the divorce, but Carter still followed her. Her feed from 8 months ago showed multiple photos with my mother, shopping trips, lunch dates, a baby shower where my mother was front and center, beaming like an actual grandmother. "They've been planning this for months," I told Carter. "This whole thing was coordinated." "But why? What does your mom get out of it?" That was the question. I couldn't figure out her angle. She didn't need money. My father had left her comfortable and she had her own income from investments. She didn't need social status. She already had that in Cedar Falls. Then I remembered something. A conversation from years ago, before I'd even met Natalie. My mother and I had been arguing about something trivial, and she'd said something that stuck with me. "You've always been too independent, Jack. You think you don't need family, but everyone needs family. And family takes care of each other, whether you like it or not." It clicked. This wasn't about money. This was about control. My mother had lost control over me when I'd moved out, gotten married, built my own life. The divorce had been my choice, not hers. She couldn't stand that, so she'd allied with Natalie, someone she could control, someone who shared her manipulative tendencies, to pull me back into their orbit. If I was tied to Natalie through a child, even a fake one, my mother would have leverage over me again. It was sick. It was twisted. And it was exactly the kind of thing Rita Pearson would do. The DNA results came back on a Tuesday. I opened the email with shaking hands, Carter looking over my shoulder. The conclusion was clear. I was not the biological father of Natalie's child. The probability of paternity was 0.0%. Got you, I whispered. But Carter was frowning at the screen. Jack, look at this. He pointed to a section of the report I'd skipped over. The lab included some additional analysis, noting genetic markers that suggested the child's father was likely of Northern European descent, with specific markers common in Irish and German populations. Brett Callahan was about as Irish as they come, red hair, pale skin, and a last name that screamed Dublin. We need to prove Brett is the father, Carter said, not just that you're not. How do we do that? Carter grinned. Leave that to me. I've got a friend who owes me a favor. 3 days later, Carter came through. His friend was a nurse at Cedar Falls Medical Center who'd been on duty when Natalie gave birth. She couldn't give us official records. That would be illegal. But she could tell us that Brett Callahan had been listed as the father on the original birth certificate. Natalie had later filed an amendment, changing it to father unknown. She was planning this from the beginning, I said. She knew Brett was the father, but she kept her options open so she could come after me later. That's some next-level scheming, Carter said. Armed with the DNA results and the information about the birth certificate, Linda Gold filed a motion to dismiss Natalie's claim and requested sanctions for fraud. The hearing was scheduled for the following week. I thought I was prepared. I thought I had everything I needed. I was wrong. 2 days before the hearing, I ran into Jenny Walsh at the grocery store. Jenny was Natalie's best friend, or had been before the divorce. She was a real estate agent, a gossip, and someone I'd never particularly liked. Jack, she said, her voice dripping with fake sympathy. How are you holding up? Fine, Jenny. I heard about the baby situation. That must be so hard for you. I started to walk away, but she followed me. You know, she said, lowering her voice conspiratorially, I think what Natalie's doing is wrong. I told her that. I stopped and turned to face her. You did? Of course. We've been friends for years, but this is too much. That baby isn't yours, it's Brett's. Everyone knows it. Then why is she doing this? Jenny glanced around, making sure no one was listening. Your mother put her up to it. Rita came to Natalie about a year ago with this whole plan. She said you owed the family for how you'd treated her, and this was a way to make things right. She promised to help Natalie get money from you, and in return, Natalie would, I don't know, stay in Rita's life or something. It was weird. My hands clenched into fists. And you're just telling me this now? I didn't want to get involved, but seeing you in court, seeing what they're doing to you, it's not right. I can't be part of it anymore. Would you testify to this? Jenny's eyes widened. In court? Against Natalie and your mom? No way. They'd destroy me. Jenny? I'm sorry, Jack. I really am. But I've told you what I know. That's all I can do. She walked away, leaving me standing in the cereal aisle, my mind racing. That night, I broke into my mother's house. Okay, broke in is a strong term. I still had a key from when I used to check on the place when she traveled. I waited until I knew she was at her book club meeting. Tuesday nights, 7 to 9, never missed it, and let myself in. I felt like a criminal, creeping through the house I'd grown up in. But I needed proof. Jenny's testimony would have been perfect, but without her, I needed something concrete. I found it in my mother's home office, in a locked drawer of her desk. The key was in the same place she'd kept it for 20 years, under the desk lamp. Some things never change. Inside the drawer was a folder labeled Natalie Project. Project, like I was a business deal. The folder contained everything. Printed emails between my mother and Natalie going back 14 months. Text message screenshots. A handwritten timeline of their plan. Notes on how to present the case in court. Even a list of witnesses they could call, all my mother's friends, all willing to lie under oath. The emails were particularly damning. In one, my mother wrote, Jack has always been too independent. This will teach him that family obligations are permanent. He'll learn to respect what I've built. In another, the key is to make him look like the villain. Judges are sympathetic to single mothers. We just need to maintain consistency in our story. And the most chilling one from 3 months ago. Once we have the court order, we can bleed him for years. Child support doesn't end until the child is 18. That's a long time to remind Jack who's really in control. I photographed every page with my phone, my hands shaking with rage. Then I put everything back exactly as I'd found it, locked the drawer, and left the house. I sent the photos to Linda Gold that night with a simple message. We've got them. Her response came 30 seconds later. Holy shit, this changes everything. See you in court. The night before the hearing, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about my mother, about the woman who'd raised me. She'd always been controlling, always been manipulative, but this was different. This was calculated cruelty. This was a deliberate attempt to ruin my life for no reason other than her own ego. I thought about my father, about the divorce papers I'd found. Had she done the same thing to him? Had she destroyed him the same way she was trying to destroy me? My phone rang at 2 a.m. It was Carter. "You awake?" he asked. "Yeah." "Good. I've been thinking. Tomorrow's going to be brutal. Your mom, Natalie, Brett, they're all going to be there. They're going to fight dirty." "I know. So we need to fight dirtier. I've got an idea." He laid out his plan. It was risky, probably illegal, and absolutely perfect. "I'm in," I said. "Damn right you are. Let's burn this whole thing down." The courtroom was packed. Word had spread through Cedar Falls, small towns, love drama, and this case had everything: betrayal, family conflict, a mysterious baby, and enough gossip to fuel conversations for months. I sat next to Linda Gold, feeling surprisingly calm. I had the evidence. I had the truth, and I had a plan. Natalie sat across the aisle with Philip Strand, looking nervous. Brett was behind her, his jaw tight. My mother sat in the front row of the gallery, her face a mask of righteous dignity. Judge Hoffman entered, and we all stood. She took her seat and reviewed her notes. "We're here today to address Mr. Pearson's motion to dismiss the paternity claim and child support order," she said. "Ms. Gold, you may proceed." Linda stood. "Your Honor, we have conclusive DNA evidence that Mr. Pearson is not the biological father of the child in question. I'd like to submit these test results into evidence." She handed the documents to the bailiff, who passed them to the judge. Hoffman reviewed them, her expression neutral. "These appear to be from a private lab," she said. "Mr. Strand, do you dispute these results?" Philip Strand stood, looking uncomfortable. "Your Honor, we question the chain of custody for these samples. We don't know how they were obtained." "The sample from Mr. Pearson was obtained via a standard cheek swab at the lab," Linda said smoothly. "The sample from the child was obtained from a pacifier. I'll admit the method was unconventional, but the results are scientifically valid." "You stole my son's pacifier?" Natalie burst out. "That's kidnapping." "It's not kidnapping to take a pacifier, Ms. Pearson," Judge Hoffman said dryly, "though I agree the method is questionable. However, if you're so confident in your claim, you should have no objection to a court-ordered DNA test." Natalie glanced at her lawyer, who shook his head slightly. She slumped back in her seat. "That won't be necessary, Your Honor," Strand said. We concede that Mr. Pearson may not be the biological father." "May not be," Linda said. "Your Honor, the results are conclusive. 0 probability of paternity. My client is not the father, and this entire case is based on fraud." "Strong words, Ms. Gold," Judge Hoffman said. "Can you back them up?" "I can, Your Honor." Linda pulled out her tablet and began displaying the photos I'd taken from my mother's office. The emails, the text messages, the handwritten plans, every damning piece of evidence. The courtroom went silent as she walked through it all. Natalie's face went white. My mother's expression didn't change, but I saw her hands grip the bench in front of her. "This is a conspiracy," Linda said. "A deliberate, calculated fraud perpetrated by Ms. Pearson and Mrs. Rita Pearson to extort money from my client. They've lied under oath, fabricated evidence, and wasted this court's time. We're requesting that all claims be dismissed with prejudice, and we're requesting sanctions against both Ms. Pearson and Mrs. Pearson for fraud and perjury." Philip Strand was on his feet. "Your Honor, we had no knowledge of any of this alleged communication. My client—" "Your client is sitting right there, Mr. Strand," Judge Hoffman said coldly. "And unless she's going to claim someone hacked her email and forged her handwriting, I suggest you sit down." Strand sat. The judge looked at Natalie. "Ms. Pearson, do you have anything to say?" Natalie stood, tears streaming down her face. I was just trying to provide for my son. Rita said Jack had made promises. She said he owed us. I didn't know it was wrong." It was a good performance, but Judge Hoffman wasn't buying it. "You filed false documents with this court," she said. "You lied under oath. You attempted to defraud Mr. Pearson of thousands of dollars. Whether you thought it was wrong or not is irrelevant." She turned to my mother. "Mrs. Pearson, stand up." My mother stood, her face finally showing emotion, fear. "You orchestrated this entire scheme," Judge Hoffman said. "You recruited Ms. Pearson, coached her, provided false testimony yourself, and conspired to commit fraud against your own son. I've been a judge for 15 years, and I've never seen anything quite this despicable." Your Honor, I was only trying to help my mother, began. You were trying to help yourself, the judge cut her off. You were trying to control your son, and you didn't care who you hurt in the process. She turned back to the courtroom. I'm dismissing all claims against Mr. Pearson with prejudice. I'm referring both Ms. Natalie Pearson and Mrs. Rita Pearson to the district attorney for possible criminal charges. And I'm ordering both of them to pay Mr. Pearson's legal fees, plus $10,000 in damages for emotional distress. The gavel came down. Court adjourned. The courtroom erupted. People were talking, pointing, pulling out their phones. I saw Mrs. Krantz, the neighborhood gossip, practically running for the door. She'd be spreading this story across town within the hour. I stood up, feeling like I'd just run a marathon. Linda shook my hand. That went better than expected, she said. Thank you for everything. My pleasure. Women like your mother and your ex give the rest of us a bad name. I turned to leave and found myself face to face with my mother. She looked smaller somehow, diminished. Jack, she said, you don't understand. I was trying to teach you. Teach me what? I said. That my own mother would destroy me to feel important? That family means nothing if it gets in the way of your ego? Message received, Mom, loud and clear. Thadro, don't you dare speak to me that way. I'm your mother. No, I said quietly. You're the woman who gave birth to me. There's a difference. I walked past her and out of the courthouse. Carter was waiting on the steps, grinning. How'd it go? We won, completely. Excellent. Ready for Phase 2? Absolutely. Phase 2 was Carter's idea, and it was beautiful in its simplicity. We were going to make sure everyone in Cedar Falls knew exactly what Natalie and my mother had tried to do. That afternoon, I created a Facebook post. I laid out the entire story, the false paternity claim, the conspiracy, the court's findings, everything. I included screenshots of the key emails with personal information redacted and a copy of the judge's order. I tagged my mother, Natalie, Brett, and every single one of my mother's garden club friends who'd been willing to lie for her. Then I posted it publicly and shared it to every Cedar Falls community group I could find. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Within an hour, I had over 200 comments and 150 shares. People were outraged. Some of my mother's friends tried to defend her, but they were drowned out by the majority who were appalled by what she'd done. Mrs. Krantz shared it with the caption, I always knew Rita Pearson was trouble. This just proves it. The local newspaper picked up the story. By evening, it was the top post on their website. Local woman and daughter-in-law charged with fraud in paternity scam. But we weren't done yet. Carter had been busy with his own project. Check this out, he said, showing me his phone. He'd created a fake Yelp review for Brett's gym. Great place to work out if you enjoy being around people who commit fraud and try to scam their exes. The owner, Brett Callahan, was involved in a scheme to falsely claim paternity of a child to extort money. Really puts the con in personal training. 1 star. That's petty, I said. Damn right it is, and I've got about 20 friends ready to post similar reviews. You're a terrible person. I know, it's why we're friends. By the end of the week, Brett's gym had lost a third of its members. Natalie had been dropped by most of her friends, and my mother had resigned from the garden club for personal reasons. I should have felt satisfied. I should have felt vindicated. Instead, I felt empty. These people had been my family, or close to it, and they tried to destroy me for no reason other than ego and greed. But the story wasn't over yet. Not by a long shot. The annual Founders Day Parade was Cedar Falls' biggest event. Every year, local businesses, community groups, and prominent families created floats and marched down Main Street while the whole town watched. It was wholesome, patriotic, and aggressively cheerful. Everything small-town America is supposed to be. This year's parade was 3 weeks after the court hearing, and Natalie, in a move that proved she had absolutely no shame, had signed up to participate. She'd created a float sponsored by Single Moms of Cedar Falls, a group she'd apparently founded, and was planning to ride through town with her baby, playing the victim card for all it was worth. My mother, despite her resignation from the garden club, was still on the parade organizing committee. She'd approved Natalie's float personally. It was a middle finger to me and to the court's ruling, a public statement that they weren't backing down. Carter and I were having beer at Murphy's when I found out. She's got some nerve, Carter said, reading the parade lineup on his phone. After everything that happened, she's going to parade around town with Brett's kid. That's Natalie. She never admits defeat. She just reframes the narrative. So what are we going to do about it? I took a long drink of my beer. We're going to give Cedar Falls a parade they'll never forget. The plan came together over the next 2 weeks. It required coordination, timing, and a willingness to be absolutely ruthless. Fortunately, I had all three. First, I reached out to Jenny Walsh. She'd refused to testify in court, but I had a feeling she might be more willing to participate in something less official. "What do you want?" she asked when I called. "I want you to live stream the parade," I said. "Specifically Natalie's float. Can you do that?" "Why would I do that?" "Because Natalie's been telling everyone that you're still friends, that you support her. I'm guessing that's not true, and I'm guessing you're tired of being associated with her scam." There was a long pause. "What are you planning, Jack?" "Something that will make it very clear who the real victim is in this situation, and something that will make sure Natalie can't play the martyr anymore." Another pause. "I'm in, but if this goes south, I was never involved. Deal." Next, Carter and I visited the courthouse clerk, a woman named Margaret who'd been working there for 30 years and had seen everything. "I need copies of public records," I told her. "Specifically the birth certificate for Natalie's baby, both the original and the amended version." Margaret raised an eyebrow. "Those are public records, but they're not usually requested. May I ask why?" "Let's just say I'm doing some genealogy research." She smiled. "Genealogy? Right. Give me 10 minutes. She came back with certified copies of both documents. The original listed Brett Callahan as the father. The amended version listed father unknown. "These will be 25, Margaret said. "And Jack, whatever you're planning, make it good. Rita Pearson's been insufferable for years. It's about time someone knocked her down a peg." The day of the parade was perfect. Sunny, 70 degrees, not a cloud in the sky. The whole town turned out. Main Street was lined with people, kids waving flags, vendors selling cotton candy and lemonade. I stood near the reviewing stand with Carter, both of us wearing Cedar Falls high school baseball caps and sunglasses. We blended into the crowd perfectly. The parade started at noon. High school marching band, vintage cars, the mayor in a convertible, local businesses on flatbed trucks, standard small-town parade fare. Then came Natalie's float. It was decorated in pink and blue, with a banner reading, "Single Moms Are Strong." Natalie sat in the center, holding her baby, wearing a white dress that made her look angelic. Brett walked alongside the float, pushing a stroller full of flowers, playing the supportive partner. The crowd's reaction was mixed. Some people cheered, others were silent. Everyone knew about the court case, but Natalie was betting on short memories and the town's general politeness. She was wrong. As the float passed the reviewing stand, Jenny Walsh stepped forward with her phone, live streaming to Facebook. She had over 2,000 followers in Cedar Falls, half the town. "Hey everyone," she said into the camera. "I'm here at the Founders Day Parade, and I'm watching Natalie Pearson's float go by. You know Natalie, the woman who tried to commit fraud by claiming her ex-husband was the father of her baby? Let me show you something interesting." She held up a poster board. On it were the 2 birth certificates, blown up to poster size, the original with Brett's name, the amended one without. "This is Brett Callahan," Jenny said, pointing at Brett, "the actual father of Natalie's baby, but Natalie tried to claim her ex-husband Jack Pearson was the father so she could scam him out of child support. She changed the birth certificate and lied in court, and now she's parading around town like she's some kind of hero." The crowd went silent. People started pulling out their phones, watching Jenny's live stream, sharing it. Natalie's face went pale. She stood up on the float, holding her baby, looking around in panic. "That's not true," she shouted. "This is harassment." "It's public record," Jenny called back. "Available at the courthouse for anyone who wants to verify it." Brett tried to grab the poster from Jenny, but Carter stepped in front of him. "I wouldn't do that, buddy," Carter said. "Assault is a crime, unlike showing public records." Brett's face turned red, but he backed off. The float kept moving, but the damage was done. The crowd was buzzing. People were talking, pointing, pulling up Jenny's live stream on their phones. By the time Natalie's float reached the end of the parade route, the video had been shared over 500 times. But we weren't finished. As the parade ended and people started to disperse, Carter and I made our move. We'd prepared flyers, hundreds of them, with the full story of Natalie's fraud, complete with quotes from the judge's ruling and copies of the key emails between Natalie and my mother. We handed them out to everyone we could reach. We left stacks at local businesses. We put them on car windshields in the parking lot. Within an hour, everyone in Cedar Falls had seen them. Natalie tried to leave quickly, but she was surrounded by former friends asking questions, demanding explanations. I saw her crying, clutching her baby, while Brett tried to push through the crowd. My mother appeared, trying to do damage control. She grabbed one of the flyers, read it, and her face went white. "Who did this?" she demanded, looking around. I stepped forward, pulling off my sunglasses. I did, Mom. Me and everyone else you tried to screw over. She stared at me, and for the first time in my life, I saw real fear in her eyes. Jack, you don't understand what you've done. This will ruin... Ruin what? Your reputation? Your standing in the community? Good. You tried to ruin my life. This is just returning the favor. I'm your mother. You keep saying that like it means something. It doesn't. Not anymore. I walked away, leaving her standing there in the middle of Main Street, surrounded by people who now knew exactly what kind of person she was. That evening, Carter and I went back to Murphy's bar. The place was packed, and we were treated like celebrities. People bought us drinks, congratulated us, told us they'd always known Natalie and my mother were trouble. You did it, Carter said, raising his beer. You actually did it. We did it, I corrected. I couldn't have done this without you. Damn right. So what now? Now? Now we wait and see what happens. What happened was predictable and satisfying. Over the next week, Natalie became a pariah in Cedar Falls. Her single moms group disbanded. Her social media following dropped by 80%. She stopped going out in public. Brett's gym lost more members. He tried to rebrand, but the damage was done. Everyone knew him as the guy who'd helped his girlfriend commit fraud. My mother's fall was even more dramatic. She was asked to step down from every committee and organization she was part of. Her friends stopped calling. When she went to the grocery store, people avoided her in the aisles. Mrs. Krantz, the neighborhood gossip, spread a rumor that my mother had done the same thing to my father during their divorce, which wasn't a rumor at all, but the truth. Within days, everyone in town knew about it. I should have felt victorious. I should have felt like justice had been served. But something was still nagging at me. Natalie and my mother had been publicly humiliated, but they hadn't really paid for what they'd done. The DA had filed charges, but those cases would take months to resolve, and they'd probably end up with plea deals and minimal consequences. I wanted more. I wanted them to understand what they'd put me through. I wanted them to feel the same fear and helplessness I'd felt when they dragged me into court. I wanted real revenge. And then, like a gift from the universe, I got my chance. The call came from Linda Gold on a Tuesday evening, 3 weeks after the parade. Jack, I just got a very interesting phone call, she said. Natalie's lawyer wants to settle. Settle what? The case is over. We won. Not the paternity case, a new case. Apparently Natalie is suing you for defamation, emotional distress, and harassment. She claims the parade incident and the flyers have destroyed her reputation and caused her severe psychological harm. I laughed. She's suing me after everything she did? That's what I said, but her lawyer seems serious. They're asking for $100,000 in damages. Let them sue. We'll destroy them in court again. That's what I told him. But Jack, there's something else. Your mother is named as a co-plaintiff. They're suing together. That stopped me cold. They're working together again? Looks like it. I think they've decided their only play is to go on the offense. If they can paint you as the aggressor, maybe they can salvage some of their reputations. That's insane. It's desperate, but desperate people do desperate things. I hung up and immediately called Carter. They're doubling down, I told him. Natalie and my mother are suing me for defamation. Are they high? You told the truth? You can't defame someone by telling the truth? I know, but they're betting on the court system being slow and expensive. Even if they lose, they'll drag me through months of legal fees and stress. So what do? We end this. Permanently. Over the next week, I dug deeper into Natalie's and my mother's finances. If they were going to sue me, I wanted to know where they were getting the money for legal fees. What I found was fascinating. Natalie's bank records, which I obtained through some creative social engineering and Carter's connections with a buddy who worked at the bank, showed regular deposits from my mother. $2,000 a month, going back over a year. My mother had been bankrolling Natalie the entire time, but more interesting were my mother's records. She'd taken out a home equity loan 6 months ago for $75,000. The money had gone into a separate account, which she'd been using to pay Natalie, her lawyers, and various other expenses related to the fraud scheme. She'd mortgaged her house to destroy me. I showed the records to Linda. No. Can we use this? In court? Maybe, but it's better as leverage. If your mother knows you have this information, she might back off. I don't want her to back off. I want her to suffer. Linda gave me a long look. Jack, I understand you're angry, but be careful. Revenge has a way of consuming people. I'm not interested in revenge, I said. I'm interested in justice. That was a lie, of course. I absolutely wanted revenge. But I also wanted it to be legal, devastating and permanent. The opportunity came from an unexpected source, Brett Callahan. Brett showed up at my door on a Friday night, looking worse than I'd ever seen him. His gym had closed the week before, unable to recover from the scandal. He'd lost everything. "I need to talk to you," he said. "I have nothing to say to you. Please, just 5 minutes." Against my better judgment, I let him in. He sat on my couch, his head in his hands. "Natalie's insane," he said. "I didn't know what she was planning. I thought the baby was mine, and we were going to be a family. Then she started talking about you, about how you owed her, about how your mom had this plan. I told her it was crazy, but she wouldn't listen. And you went along with it anyway. I loved her. I thought she loved me. But she was just using me, just like she used you. Why are you telling me this?" Brett looked up, his eyes red. "Because she's planning something else. Her and your mom. They're not really suing you for defamation. That's just cover." "Cover for what?" "I don't know exactly, but I heard them talking last week. They're planning to do something at the court hearing, something that will make you look bad, make them look like victims. Your mom kept saying, 'We need a public incident, something that will get sympathy.'" My blood ran cold. "What kind of incident?" "I don't know, but Natalie's been practicing crying on command, and your mom's been coaching her on what to say. Whatever they're planning, it's going to be bad." After Brett left, I called Carter and Linda. We had an emergency meeting at Linda's office. "If they're planning to stage some kind of scene at the hearing, we need to be prepared," Linda said. "But we also need proof of what they're planning. Otherwise, it's just your word against theirs." "What if we recorded them?" Carter suggested. "Set up a situation where they talk about their plan and we catch it on audio." "That's risky," Linda said. "Iowa is a one-party consent state, which means you can record a conversation you're part of. But if you're not part of the conversation, it's illegal wiretapping." "What if I confronted them?" I said. "Went to my mother's house, accused them of planning something, and recorded their reaction?" Linda thought about it. "That could work. If you're part of the conversation, you can legally record it. And if they admit to planning a false incident, we can use that recording in court." "It's dangerous," Carter said. "If they figure out you're recording, they could claim you're threatening them or something." "I'll take that risk." 2 days later, I went to my mother's house. I knew Natalie would be there. Brett had told me they met every Sunday afternoon to coordinate their strategy. I knocked on the door. My mother answered, her face hardening when she saw me. "What do you want, Jack?" "To talk." "Can I come in?" "We have nothing to say to each other." "I think we do. I know you're planning something for the court hearing. I want to give you a chance to back down before this gets worse." She hesitated, then stepped aside. "Fine, come in." Natalie was sitting in the living room, the baby in a playpen beside her. She looked startled to see me. "Jack, what are you doing here?" "I'm here to end this," I said. I had my phone in my jacket pocket, recording everything. "I know you two are planning to stage some kind of incident at the hearing. I want you to stop." My mother laughed. "You're paranoid, Jack. We're not planning anything." "Really?" "Because I have a witness who says otherwise." Natalie's eyes widened. "Brett, that bastard told you." "So it's true." "We're not staging anything," my mother said quickly. "We're simply prepared to defend ourselves against your harassment." "By defend yourselves, you mean lie and manipulate the situation to make me look like the bad guy." "You are the bad guy," Natalie shouted. "You humiliated me at the parade. You destroyed my reputation. You've turned the whole town against us." "I told the truth. That's not harassment." "The truth?" My mother's voice was cold. "The truth is that you've always been ungrateful. I gave you everything, and you threw it back in my face. You married that woman against my wishes. You divorced her when I told you to work it out. And now you're trying to destroy both of us because we dared to hold you accountable." "Accountable for what? For not being your puppet?" "For being a selfish, ungrateful child who thinks he's better than his family." The mask had finally come off. My mother's face was twisted with rage, all pretense of maternal concern gone. "This was never about Natalie's baby," I said quietly. "This was never about money or support. This was about you needing to control me and me refusing to let you." "You're damn right," she hissed. "You've been defiant since you were a teenager. Always questioning, always pushing back, always thinking you knew better. Well, you don't, and it's time you learned that." "And the court hearing? What are you planning?" Natalie stood up. "We're going to tell the judge that you've been stalking us, that you've been threatening us, harassing us, making us fear for our safety. We have witnesses who will testify to it." "More lies." "Lies that will be believed," my mother said, "because everyone knows you're angry. Everyone knows you're obsessed with revenge. It won't be hard to convince the judge that you've crossed the line. And then what? You get a restraining order against me? We get you arrested, Natalie said with a smile. For harassment, for stalking, maybe even for threatening violence. Your reputation will be destroyed, you'll lose your job, and you'll finally understand what it feels like to lose everything. I looked at both of them, these two women who'd tried so hard to ruin me, and I felt nothing but pity. Thank you, I said. That's all I needed to hear. I pulled out my phone and stopped the recording. My mother's face went pale. You recorded us? Every word. And in Iowa, that's perfectly legal as long as I'm part of the conversation. Which I was. You can't use that in court, Natalie said, but her voice was shaking. Actually, I can. And I will. Your plan to stage a false incident, to lie to the judge, to have me arrested on false charges, it's all right here. Along with your admission that this whole thing has been about control and revenge, not about justice or the baby. I headed for the door, then turned back. You know what the saddest part is? If you'd just left me alone after the divorce, none of this would have happened. You could have moved on. I could have moved on. But you couldn't let it go. You had to keep pushing, keep scheming, keep trying to hurt me, and now you've destroyed yourselves. I left. Their shocked faces burned into my memory. The defamation hearing was scheduled for the following Thursday. Linda filed the recording as evidence the day before, along with a motion to have the case dismissed and to seek sanctions against Natalie and my mother for abuse of process. The judge, a different one this time, Judge Marcus Webb, reviewed the filing and called an emergency conference. We all gathered in his chambers, me, Linda, Natalie, her lawyer Philip Strand, my mother, and her new lawyer, a nervous young guy named Tim something. Judge Webb was in his 60s, with gray hair and the weary expression of someone who'd seen every kind of legal shenanigans imaginable. I've reviewed the recording, he said, and I have to say, in 25 years on the bench, I've never seen anything quite like this. Mrs. Pearson, did you really plan to falsely accuse Mr. Pearson of stalking and threatening you? Natalie looked at her lawyer, who shook his head slightly. We were just talking, my mother said. We didn't mean... You explicitly stated your plan to lie to a judge and have Mr. Pearson arrested on false charges, Webb said. That's not just talking. That's conspiracy to commit fraud and perjury. Your Honor, Philip Strand said, my clients were upset and speaking emotionally. They didn't actually intend... Mr. Strand, I'm going to stop you right there. Your clients have a pattern of lying under oath, fabricating evidence, and attempting to manipulate the legal system. This recording is just the latest example. I'm dismissing this case with prejudice, I'm sanctioning both plaintiffs $25,000 each for abuse of process, and I'm referring this matter to the district attorney for criminal prosecution. Natalie started crying. Real tears this time, not the practiced ones. My mother just stared at the judge, her face ashen. Furthermore, Webb continued, I'm issuing a restraining order. Ms. Pearson and Mrs. Pearson are prohibited from contacting Mr. Pearson in any way for a period of 5 years. Any violation will result in immediate arrest. He looked at me. Mr. Pearson, you're free to go. I apologize on behalf of the court system for what you've been put through. We left the chambers. In the hallway, Natalie tried to approach me, but Linda stepped between us. Restraining order, Linda said. Back off. Natalie's face crumpled. Jack, please. I'm sorry. I never wanted it to go this far. Your mother, she convinced me. Don't, I said. Don't blame her. You made your choices. You both did. And now you get to live with the consequences. My mother appeared behind Natalie. For a moment, we just looked at each other. I hope you're happy, she said. You've destroyed your own mother. No, I said. You destroyed yourself. I just made sure everyone could see it. I walked away, and this time I didn't look back. But the story wasn't quite over yet. That night, a massive thunderstorm rolled into Cedar Falls, the kind of storm that knocks out power and makes you wonder if the apocalypse is starting. I was home, drinking a beer and watching the lightning through my window when I heard a car pull up outside. Then another car. I looked out and saw Natalie's SUV and my mother's sedan parked in my driveway. You've got to be kidding me, I muttered. I called Carter. They're here, both of them, at my house. In the middle of a thunderstorm? Are they insane? Apparently. Get over here. I think this is about to get ugly. On my way. I went to the door as Natalie and my mother got out of their cars. They were both soaked within seconds, the rain coming down in sheets. What are you doing here? I called from the porch. There's a restraining order. We need to talk, my mother shouted over the storm. This has gone too far. You think? Go home before I call the police? Please, Jack, Natalie said. We can work this out. We can settle this quietly. No more courts, no more lawyers, just us. There is no us. There never will be again. My mother started up the porch steps. You're going to listen to me, Jack. I'm your mother, and you owe me. I owe you nothing. Carter's truck pulled up, and he jumped out, running through the rain. Everyone needs to calm down, he said, positioning himself between me and the two women. Stay out of this, my mother snapped. Not a chance. You two are violating a restraining order. You need to leave, now. We're not leaving until Jack agrees to drop the charges, Natalie said. What charges? I asked. The DA filed charges this afternoon, my mother said. Fraud, perjury, conspiracy. We could go to prison, Jack. Is that what you want? Your own mother in prison? You did this to yourself. We can make a deal, Natalie said desperately. We'll leave town. We'll never contact you again. Just tell the DA you don't want to press charges. I'm not pressing charges. The state is, and they don't need my permission. Lightning flashed, illuminating their desperate faces. Please, my mother said, and for the first time in my life, I heard real fear in her voice. I'm begging you. I made mistakes. I was wrong. But I'm still your mother. That has to count for something. I looked at her, this woman who'd given birth to me, raised me, and then tried to destroy me. You're right, I said. It does count for something. It counts as the ultimate betrayal. A stranger trying to scam me would have been bad enough. But my own mother? That's unforgivable. Jack, no. You don't get to jack me anymore. You don't get to play the mother card. You lost that right when you decided your ego was more important than your son. Thunder crashed overhead, and the power went out. The streetlights flickered and died, leaving us in darkness except for the lightning. You're going to regret this, my mother said, her voice cold. When I'm gone, when you're alone, you're going to wish you'd forgiven me. Maybe, I said, but I'll still know I did the right thing. Natalie started crying again, clutching my mother's arm. This isn't fair. We made mistakes, but we don't deserve to lose everything. You tried to make me lose everything, I said. My money, my reputation, my freedom. You were going to have me arrested on false charges. And now you want sympathy. We were desperate. You were greedy. There's a difference. Carter's phone rang. He answered it, listened for a moment, then looked at me. That was Mrs. Krantz. She saw these two pull up and called the cops. They're on their way. My mother's eyes widened. No, Jack, tell them it was a misunderstanding. Tell them we were just talking. You're violating a restraining order. That's not a misunderstanding. That's a crime. Please, sirens wailed in the distance, getting closer. You need to leave, Carter said. Right now. If you're gone before the cops get here, maybe Jack won't press charges for the restraining order violation. They looked at me, both of them drenched and desperate. Go, I said, and don't ever come back. They ran to their cars. Natalie's SUV wouldn't start. Flooded engine, probably. My mother's sedan started, and Natalie jumped in. They pulled out of my driveway just as the police car turned onto my street. The cop pulled up, and I recognized him. Officer Mike Denton, a guy I'd gone to high school with. Hey, Jack, he said, getting out of his car. Got a call about a disturbance? My ex-wife and my mother were here, violating their restraining order, but they just left. Mike looked at the tire tracks in my muddy driveway. You want to file a report? I thought about it. I could have them arrested right now. One more charge, one more nail in their coffins. But I was tired. Tired of the fighting, tired of the drama, tired of letting them take up space in my head. No, I said. They're gone. That's enough. Mike nodded. Your call. But if they come back, you call me immediately. Understand? I will. Thanks, Mike. He drove off, and Carter and I stood on the porch, watching the storm. You could have had them arrested, Carter said. I know. Why didn't you? Because it's over. Really over. They've lost everything that matters. Their reputations, their friends, their standing in the community. They're facing criminal charges. They've been exposed as liars and frauds. What more could I do to them? You could have them locked up? Maybe. But that would mean more court dates, more testimony, more of my time and energy spent on them. I'm done with that. I'm done with them. Carter grinned. So what now? Now? Now I move on. I rebuild my life. I find people who actually deserve to be in it. Sounds good. But first, let's get drunk. I think you've earned it. We went inside, cracked open some beers, and watched the storm rage outside. The next morning, I woke up to find that the story had spread across Cedar Falls one final time. Mrs. Krantz had witnessed the confrontation and told everyone. The local newspaper ran a follow-up story. Fraud conspirators violate restraining order in desperate confrontation. The district attorney's office released a statement confirming that charges had been filed against Natalie Pearson and Rita Pearson for fraud, perjury, and conspiracy. The trial was scheduled for 6 months later. I didn't attend the trial. Linda represented my interests, but I stayed away. I didn't need to see them again. I didn't need closure or vindication or any of that. I just needed to move forward. The verdict came back guilty on all counts. Natalie got 18 months in prison and 5 years probation. My mother got 2 years and 5 years probation. They were also ordered to pay restitution, $75,000 to me for legal fees, emotional distress, and the fraud attempt. I never collected a dime. They didn't have the money, and I didn't care. The money had never been the point. A week after the sentencing, I got a letter from my mother. It was short. Jack, I hope someday you can forgive me. I was wrong about everything. I'm sorry. Mom. I read it once, then threw it away. Maybe someday I would forgive her. Maybe not. But that was a problem for future Jack. Present Jack had a life to rebuild. I started dating again. Nothing serious, just getting back out there. I made new friends, people who didn't know about the scandal and didn't care when they found out. I got a promotion at work. I fixed up my rental house and actually started to feel like it was home. Carter and I still met at Murphy's every Friday. We still joked about the whole mess, but it was starting to feel like ancient history. 6 months after the trial, I ran into Brett at the grocery store. He looked different, thinner, older, defeated. Jack, he said awkwardly. Hey, Brett. I heard you won. The trial and everything. Yeah, good. You deserved it. I'm sorry I was part of all that. I was an idiot. Yeah, you were. He nodded. I'm moving to Des Moines. Fresh start, you know? Anyway, I just wanted to say sorry, for what it's worth. It's worth something. Good luck, Brett. He walked away, and I realized I didn't hate him. He'd been a pawn, just like I'd almost been. The real villains were Natalie and my mother, and they'd already paid the price. A year after the whole thing started, I was finally truly free. I'd learned some hard lessons. Family doesn't always mean loyalty. Blood doesn't always mean love. And sometimes the people who are supposed to protect you are the ones you need protection from. But I'd also learned that the truth is powerful, that standing up for yourself matters, and that revenge, when done right, doesn't have to involve violence or breaking the law. Sometimes the best revenge is simply making sure everyone knows the truth. Natalie and my mother tried to bury me. They dug the hole, they sharpened the shovels, they invited witnesses, but they forgot one crucial thing. I'm pretty good at climbing out of holes, and once I was out, I made damn sure they fell in instead. I never saw either of them again. Natalie moved away after her release from prison. My mother stayed in Cedar Falls, but she was a ghost. Avoided, ignored, a cautionary tale about what happens when you let ego and control consume you. Me? I'm doing fine. Better than fine, actually. I've got good friends, a good job, and a life that's entirely my own. And every time I drive past my mother's house or see Natalie's old social media posts, I smile. Because I won. Not through violence, not through illegal schemes, not through becoming like them. I won by being smarter, by being patient, and by making sure the truth came out. They tried to tie me down with blood and broken vows. Instead, I broke free and left them drowning in the consequences of their own actions. And that, more than anything else, is the sweetest revenge of all.